The little girl called the police, crying, "My dad locked me in the room and did something terrible." Ring ring ring. The shrill ring of the emergency phone pierced the gloomy atmosphere. Martha startled, spilling her coffee, the liquid spreading across the desk. "Damn it," she muttered, quickly grabbing the phone. Isabella sat upright, her eyes tense as Martha answered the call. The small police station seemed to hold its breath, with only Martha's voice breaking the silence as she spoke into the receiver. Her brow furrowed as she listened intently. "Coastal Police Station, this is Martha speaking," she said, her voice steady but tinged with tension. From the other end of the line came a weak voice, like a whisper carried by the wind. Please help me." Martha straightened up, exchanging a quick glance with Isabella. "Where are you? Tell me your location," she asked, her voice calm and reassuring. "It's so cold, so dark. I'm scared." The girl's voice was faint, then abruptly fell silent. Martha and Isabella shared a worried look. The weight of the room seemed to grow heavier, with only the rain outside breaking the stillness. "Can you describe the room you're in? What's around you? A window, furniture, or anything distinctive?" Martha pressed, but the child seemed too frightened to respond. Suddenly, an eerie noise came through the line. Martha froze, her eyes widening. It sounded like wind whistling through a crack, but mixed with something more sinister like a muffled scream. Then the call abruptly ended. "Damn it!" Martha set the phone down, her worry evident. "We need to act," Martha said, standing abruptly, her expression grave. "With no address and no details, how are we supposed to find her?" Isabella asked, unable to hide her concern. "We have the emergency tracking system. If the call lasted long enough, we should have coordinates," Martha replied, moving toward the computer. Isabella followed, her mind racing. She knew Martha was always resolute in situations like this, but a part of her couldn't shake an uneasiness. "What if it's a prank?" she asked, her voice faltering. Martha turned, her eyes sharp. "And what if it's not? That's a child, Isabella." The statement left Isabella without further argument. Martha quickly entered data into the tracking system. After a few moments, the screen displayed a location near the coast, where a cluster of impoverished homes stood. Martha glanced at Isabella, needing no words. "Let's go," Isabella said, grabbing her coat and flashlight. The patrol car rolled down a bumpy road, water spraying up as its tires splashed through large puddles. Martha gripped the wheel, her eyes focused on the road ahead, where the headlights struggled against the dense curtain of rain. Isabella sat beside her, holding the radio to communicate with the station if necessary. "This area is like a maze," Isabella said, her eyes glued to the digital map. "Yes, but if the tracking system is accurate, we'll find the place soon enough," Martha replied firmly. They stopped in front of a rundown coastal neighborhood, where the emergency system had pinpointed the call. All the houses were shrouded in darkness, with only the faint beams from their flashlights illuminating the damp, moldy walls. The heavy rain had turned the dirt road into a muddy mess, with water pooling at their feet. "We'll start here," Isabella said, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "If the call really came from here, someone must know something." They began knocking on doors, explaining the situation to residents startled by their presence on such a stormy night. "We don't know anything," said an elderly woman, her eyes filled with concern. "But if you're looking for someone, you might want to check the wooden house at the end of the road. It looks abandoned, but sometimes I hear noises from there." Martha and Isabella exchanged glances, then thanked the woman before heading off. The path grew increasingly treacherous, with mud clinging to their boots and rain lashing their faces. At last, they reached a decrepit wooden house. The beams of their flashlights revealed peeling wood and cracked windows. Isabella shone her flashlight around the house, nodding quietly. "Something's not right. Wait. Martha, do you hear that?" Martha froze, listening intently. At first, there was only the sound of the pouring rain and the wind howling through the cracks. Then, faintly, there came a weak, sobbing sound. Martha looked at Isabella, and their eyes widened. "It's crying," Isabella whispered. "It's definitely a child." They hurried to the door, and Martha knocked loudly. "This is the police. Is anyone inside?" There was no response. The sobbing grew fainter but was unmistakably coming from inside. "We can't wait any longer," Martha said, retrieving a crowbar from the patrol car. With Isabella's help, they broke the door open with a few forceful strikes. The door swung open, revealing a dark, freezing room. The air was thick with the stench of mold and alcohol. "This is the police. If anyone's here, come out immediately." Martha's voice echoed in the empty space. No one responded, but the faint sobbing continued, emanating from a corner of the room. Isabella shone her flashlight toward the dark corner, and the sight that greeted them left both women frozen in place. A little girl, around 7 or 8 years old, was huddled in the corner of the room, her clothes soaked and filthy. Her red, swollen eyes betrayed the hours she had spent crying, and her pale face looked devoid of life. She clutched her knees tightly, trembling uncontrollably. "Don't be scared," Martha said, trying to keep her voice as gentle as possible. She knelt down, placing her flashlight to the side and softly resting a hand on the child's frail shoulder. "I'm Martha, and this is Isabella. We're here to help you." The girl lifted her head, her wide eyes filled with panic. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, as if any sudden noise might startle her. Don't take me outside. I'm scared of the light," she stammered weakly. Isabella frowned, exchanging a questioning glance with Martha. But Martha merely nodded slightly, signaling Isabella to hold her questions. Turning back to the girl, she smiled gently. "It's okay, you're safe now. We just want to take you somewhere warm, all right?" The girl didn't respond, her lost gaze fixed on Martha, as though she couldn't comprehend what was happening. Isabella stepped closer, wrapping her coat around the child's fragile body. "Can you stand up? We'll leave this place right away." At that moment, from the opposite end of the room, a slurred voice cut through the tension. "What are you doing in my house?" A drunken man, disheveled and unsteady on his feet, emerged from the shadows. His bloodshot eyes locked onto Martha and Isabella as he stumbled toward them. "We're the police. Are you the father of this girl?" Martha asked firmly, gripping her flashlight tightly, prepared for anything unexpected. "Yeah, she's my daughter," he slurred, his voice thick with alcohol. "I'm just protecting her, that's all." "Protecting her?" Isabella echoed, her tone laced with sarcasm. "In a damp, pitch-black room like this? You call this protection?" The man staggered further into the room, glaring at Martha and Isabella with drunken anger. "She can't handle the light, you don't understand. I'm doing this for her own good. Locking your daughter in a miserable room like this is for her own good?" Martha snapped. "She called us for help, did you know that?" "Help?" The man looked confused, then let out a bitter laugh. "She's just scared of everything. She doesn't need help. I'm her father, I know what she needs." "Do you really?" Isabella stepped forward, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Look at her. Does she look like someone who's being protected?" The man glanced down at his daughter, but his bloodshot eyes couldn't hide his helplessness. He mumbled. I didn't have any other choice. I just wanted her to be safe." "Enough," Martha said, unwilling to waste more time. "We'll continue this conversation at the station. This girl needs medical attention immediately. Isabella, take her to the car." Isabella knelt beside the girl, her voice soft. "It's all right, you're safe now. We're going to help you." The girl's frightened eyes darted between Martha and Isabella, searching for some semblance of safety in these two strangers. Finally, she nodded. Isabella smiled, wrapping her coat securely around the child before lifting her up. The rain continued to pour heavily as they made their way back to the car. The girl sat in the back seat, curled up in the coat, silent and withdrawn. Martha and Isabella drove in silence, their minds racing with unanswered questions. Raindrops pelted the roof of the patrol car as Martha and Isabella brought the father and the girl back to the station. The girl sat in the back seat, her wide, fearful eyes staring out the window. Isabella sat beside her, gently comforting her, though the girl remained silent. Martha kept her focus on the road, her face set in determination but tinged with anger. The drunken man sat in the passenger seat, mumbling incoherently. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted her to be safe. I didn't have another choice." Martha shot him a cold glance. "Save it. You'll have your chance to explain at the station." The man closed his eyes, leaning his head against the car window, as though he had nothing left to say. Isabella turned to the girl and gently asked, "What's your name? Can you tell us your name?" The girl shook her head slightly, her lips pressed tightly together. Isabella remained patient, her voice kind. "That's okay. You don't have to say anything right now. But Martha and I are here to help you, do you understand?" A faint glimmer of recognition flashed in the girl's eyes before fading again. Isabella sighed, turning back to Martha. "She's still too scared. It'll take time." The car pulled into the driveway of the police station, its faint yellow lights cutting through the rain. Martha parked and turned to the man. "Get out. And don't try anything." The man stumbled out of the car, nearly falling as his legs gave way. Martha steadied him, dragging him inside. Isabella carried the girl, whispering softly, "It's okay, we're almost somewhere safe." As they entered the station, the familiar quiet was broken by the tension in the air. Javier, the officer on duty, looked up from his desk, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. "Martha, Isabella, what did you bring in on a stormy night like this?" Javier asked, curiosity evident in his voice. "There's a lot to explain, Javier," Martha replied, pushing the father into a chair. "We got an emergency call from this little girl. When we arrived, we found her locked in a dark, damp room with this drunken man, who claims to be her father. For now, let him sober up while we figure this out." Javier glanced at the man, then at Isabella, who was still holding the girl. "The poor thing looks terrified. I'll get some warm water and a snack for her." "Do it, thank you," Isabella said quickly, placing the girl in a chair near the heater. "Would you like some warm water? Or maybe some cookies?" The girl still didn't answer, curling up and staring blankly at the floor. Isabella sighed, sitting down beside her, trying to let her gaze convey a sense of safety and reassurance. Martha turned to Javier, nodding toward the father. "And him run an identity check. See if you can dig up any information." Javier nodded and picked up his laptop. Meanwhile, Martha dragged a chair in front of the man and looked him straight in the eyes. "What's your name?" The man shook his head, his trembling hands resting on his knees. "Richard. Richard Sanchez." "All right, Richard. Now tell me exactly what happened. Why was your daughter locked in that dark room?" Martha asked, her tone firm but not raised. Richard looked up, his bloodshot eyes glistening. I had no other choice. She's afraid of the light. Every time she sees it, she screams, panics. I just wanted to keep her safe." Martha crossed her arms, skepticism evident in her expression. "Afraid of the light? That doesn't explain why you locked her in such conditions." Richard dropped his head, as if he had no more excuses left. Isabella stepped forward, interjecting. "Richard, we're not here to accuse you, but we need the truth. The child needs proper care, and clearly, you're not capable of providing that in your current state. Martha cut in decisively. For now, you'll stay here. We're taking her to the hospital for a health check. After that, we'll decide what happens next. Richard lifted his head, his eyes filled with desperation. Please, don't take her away. She's all I have. You have no other choice, Martha said, standing. The child needs to be safe, and it's clear staying with you right now isn't an option. Isabella gently lifted the girl, feeling the small body trembling in her arms. We're going to the hospital. You'll be okay, everything will be all right. Martha watched Isabella and the girl leave, the weight of the situation heavy on her mind. Richard sat slumped in silence, saying nothing more. From behind the desk, Javier looked up and murmured. There's more to this story than meets the eye. Martha sighed, her eyes fixed on Richard. We'll find out the truth soon enough. Isabella drove the patrol car slowly through the thick curtain of rain, the headlights slicing through the oppressive darkness. The little girl sat in the back seat, cradled in Isabella's arms, her small body trembling intermittently. Martha sat in the passenger seat, checking the map and making calls to the local hospital to alert them of the emergency. We're on our way, Martha said over the phone, her voice urgent. A girl, around 7 years old, found locked in deplorable conditions. She's showing signs of severe distress and fear. Prepare the medical team. Understood, came the reply from the other end. We're getting ready. But with the current weather, some main roads might be flooded. Be cautious near the Brighton Bridge. Martha hung up and glanced at Isabella. The Brighton Bridge might be our last challenge tonight. Isabella nodded, her eyes focused on the road ahead. This storm is making everything harder. But we can't leave her at the station in this state. The girl looked up at Isabella, her eyes full of fear and exhaustion. Isabella offered a soft smile and whispered. It's okay. We'll be somewhere safe soon. But inside, Isabella's heart was heavy. The memory of that dark, freezing room and the terrified look in the girl's eyes replayed in her mind. Martha, sensing her partner's thoughts, spoke up. Do you think Richard was telling the truth? About her being afraid of the light? Isabella was silent for a few moments before replying. I don't know. But I felt his desperation. Whatever the reason, it's clear he doesn't know how to protect her. Not knowing how to protect her is no different from harming her, Martha said firmly. No matter his reasons, keeping her in such conditions is unacceptable. The car approached the Brighton Bridge. The road was flooded, with rushing water beneath the bridge threatening to swallow everything in its path. Isabella stopped the car and lowered the window to assess the situation. Do you think we should try to cross? Martha glanced at the surging water below and then at the clock. We don't have time. The girl needs medical attention now. Let's go. Gripping the wheel tightly, Isabella drove slowly onto the bridge. The car swayed slightly as the tires rolled over the slick surface. The rain continued to pour relentlessly, the sound of water splashing under the car echoing ominously. The girl instinctively grabbed Isabella's hand, her eyes wide with fear. It's okay, Isabella said softly, glancing back at her. We'll be fine. After a few tense minutes, they made it across the bridge. Martha exhaled in relief as the lights of the local hospital appeared in the distance. Isabella pressed the accelerator, speeding toward the building. Medical staff were waiting at the entrance. A young nurse, Valeria, rushed out with a wheelchair. Bring the girl here, she said, her eyes filled with concern as she saw the child's frail condition. Isabella carried the girl out of the car and gently placed her in the wheelchair. Martha followed, quickly briefing Valeria. The girl was locked in a dark room. We're unsure if she's injured, but her physical and mental state is clearly unstable. She needs a full examination. Valeria nodded and wheeled the girl inside. Isabella watched them go, her eyes full of worry. Martha placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and said softly. We did the right thing. It's in the doctor's hands now. A middle-aged doctor, seemingly in charge, approached them. Can you provide us with more details? Does the girl have any family accompanying her? The girl's father is currently being held at the police station on suspicion of abuse and neglect, Martha replied. We don't have additional information about her medical condition aside from signs of a fear of light. Understood, the doctor said, quickly jotting notes on a clipboard. We'll conduct both a physical and psychological evaluation immediately. Isabella stood silent for a moment, looking through the glass at the nurses tending to the little girl. Martha gently pulled her aside into the hallway. You need to take a break. There's nothing more we can do here. Isabella shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. She was so terrified. Do you think we were too late? Martha looked Isabella directly in the eyes, her tone firm. It's never too late. We got her out of that place. The rest will be a long journey, but tonight, she's safe. Isabella gave a faint nod, though the weight on her heart didn't lift. They sat on the waiting room chairs, silently watching the dim, flickering hospital lights. Time dragged on, each minute stretching unbearably. Valeria returned after a while, her voice soft. The girl is still frightened, but there are no serious physical injuries. Her mental state is the bigger concern. We'll continue to monitor her and keep you updated once we have more diagnostic results. Isabella felt a small sense of relief, though it was fleeting. Thank you, Valeria. We'll wait for further news. Valeria smiled, placing a comforting hand on Isabella's shoulder. Thank you both for bringing her here. We'll do everything we can to help her. Isabella turned to Martha, exchanging a glance filled with quiet resolve. Yet deep inside, they both knew this story was far from over. After leaving the hospital, Martha and Isabella returned to the police station. The rain had eased slightly, but the cold wind still howled, blanketing the small town in a grim, oppressive atmosphere. Martha sighed as she parked the car, glancing through the window to see Richard still slumped in the waiting area, his head buried in his hands. Javier, standing behind the front desk, shook his head as they walked in. He hasn't said anything else. I ran his records, but there's no prior reports involving him or the girl. Martha glanced at Richard and motioned toward the interrogation room. Take him in there. We need more answers before moving forward. Javier nodded and approached Richard, pulling him to his feet. Let's go. You need to answer some questions. Richard stumbled after him, his expression blank. Isabella watched the scene, her feelings conflicted. She couldn't ignore the man's helplessness and despair, but his actions toward the girl were inexcusable. Richard sat across from Martha, his hands resting on the table, his eyes vacant and lifeless. Isabella stood quietly in the corner, observing. Martha began, her tone firm. Richard Sanchez, you said your daughter is afraid of light. Can you explain that? We need the truth. Richard didn't respond immediately. He sat motionless for a moment, as if trying to piece together fragmented memories. Finally, he exhaled, his hoarse voice breaking the silence. Her name is Lucy. She has something. I don't know what it is. Every time there's bright light, she screams and cries uncontrollably. I tried taking her to a doctor, but I couldn't afford to finish her treatments. Then why did you lock her in that room? Martha asked, her gaze unwavering. Did you think that was the best way to protect her? Richard raised his head, his eyes brimming with tears. I didn't know what else to do. Her mother died when she was little. It's just been me. I have to work all day to make ends meet. If I left her outside, she'd panic. I thought if I kept her in the dark, at least she wouldn't be afraid. Martha crossed her arms, a mixture of anger and pity in her expression. Did it not occur to you that isolating her like that might make things worse? Locking a child in darkness all day is abuse, Richard. Richard lowered his head again, his voice barely audible. I'm not a good father. But I love her. She's all I have. I didn't mean to hurt her. Isabella stepped forward, placing a hand on Richard's shoulder, her tone gentler. Richard, we don't doubt that you love your daughter. But what you did was wrong. You need to change, and first, you need to accept that you can't take care of Lucy on your own. Richard looked up, his face etched with anguish. Are you going to take her away from me? I can't live without her. Martha's voice was firm. That's not for us to decide. What happens next depends on how you cooperate to ensure she gets the help she needs. You put her in this situation. If you truly love her, let us help you. As they left the interrogation room, Martha sighed, turning to Isabella. What do you think? Richard doesn't seem malicious, but I can't overlook what he's done to that girl. Leaning against the wall, Isabella's gaze grew distant. I think he was pushed to his limit. But desperation doesn't excuse irresponsibility. We need to find a better solution for Lucy. Javier approached, holding a cup of coffee, interrupting their thoughts. I just got a call from the hospital. They want to update you on the girl's condition. Martha nodded. We'll head back there immediately. Isabella, can you stay here and keep an eye on Richard? Isabella gave a small nod, the weight of the situation still heavy on her. All right. But let me know as soon as you hear anything about Lucy. Returning to the workstation, Isabella sat at her desk, staring at the computer screen. In her mind, Lucy's cries echoed, and the image of the girl huddled in the dark corner tightened her chest. Isabella knew Richard hadn't intended to harm his daughter, but his ignorance and helplessness had pushed Lucy into an unbearable situation. Javier sat down beside Isabella, placing a cup of coffee in front of her. You okay? Isabella nodded, but her voice was tired. I just can't stop thinking about Lucy. No child should have to endure something like that. Javier took a sip of his coffee, remaining silent for a moment before saying. You know, sometimes we can't save everyone. But at least tonight, we got her out of that place. Yeah, Isabella replied, though the thought didn't bring her much solace. I just hope we weren't too late. Martha drove back to the hospital in the dead of night, the oppressive darkness seeming to engulf everything around her. The occasional glow from streetlights was far too faint to lift the heavy feeling in her chest. She thought about Richard's pained yet helpless expression and about Lucy, the frail girl huddled in the corner of that dark, cold room. When she arrived at the hospital, Martha headed to the waiting area, where the doctors and nurses were still working. Valeria, the young nurse they had met earlier, approached her with a serious expression. The girl is still very scared, Valeria said. We're trying to calm her down enough to conduct thorough tests. But her psychological state is extremely fragile. She shows signs of withdrawal and fear, which are common in children who have been neglected or subjected to extreme stress. Martha sighed, her face growing more solemn. Do you think she'll be okay? I mean, if she gets proper care. Valeria thought for a moment before responding. That depends on her environment. If she's placed in a safe, loving setting, I believe Lucy can recover. But it will take time. As Martha and Valeria spoke, Martha's phone buzzed. She stepped out of the hospital to take the call. It was Isabella, her voice urgent but steady. Martha, I spoke with Richard again. He mentioned something important we need to check right away. What is it? Martha asked, finding a quieter corner. Richard said he tried to take Lucy to a private clinic a few months ago, but they refused treatment because he didn't have enough money, Isabella explained. The clinic's name is Hope Clinic. I think they might have some medical records for Lucy. Martha nodded. Good. I'll look into it. Are you sure Richard isn't hiding anything else? He seems sincere, Isabella replied. But I can't say for certain if he's told us everything. That clinic might give us more answers. Thanking Isabella, Martha returned to Valeria. Do you know anything about Hope Clinic? Is it reliable? Valeria thought for a moment. It's a small clinic that focuses on cases without health insurance. But they're known for being under-resourced and often turn away complex cases. Martha frowned. That matches what Richard said. Thanks. I'll try reaching out to them. Martha spent nearly an hour trying to contact the clinic. Eventually, she got through to Carmen, a staff member at Hope Clinic. Yes, we have records for a girl named Lucy Sanchez, Carmen confirmed. She was brought in about 3 months ago. We couldn't provide treatment because of financial constraints, but based on the symptoms reported, she may have a rare condition related to light sensitivity. Martha took careful notes. Is there any way to confirm that diagnosis? Did you run any tests? No, Carmen admitted. We could only document her symptoms and recommend that the family take her to a specialist center. But it seems they didn't follow through. Thanking Carmen, Martha hurried back to the hospital. When she arrived, she found Valeria and a doctor talking to Lucy. The girl was still sitting silently on the bed, but her eyes looked less terrified than before. Martha approached them and shared the information she had gathered. Hope Clinic says Lucy might have a rare condition related to light sensitivity, Martha explained. I'm no doctor, but it seems to align with what Richard told us. The doctor nodded, taking notes. That's very helpful. We'll conduct more specific tests to confirm. If that's the case, she'll need a carefully adjusted environment. Martha exhaled deeply, feeling like they were closer to understanding the truth. Yet, she couldn't shake the lingering worry. Diagnosing Lucy's condition was only the first step. Ensuring she had a safe and healthy life would be a much longer journey. By the time Martha returned to the station, dawn was breaking. The storm had subsided, but the sky remained overcast, the pale morning light failing to dispel the heavy mood. Isabella was waiting at her desk, a cup of cold coffee in hand. Any news? Isabella asked as soon as Martha walked in. Martha sat down and recounted everything she had learned from the hospital and the clinic. Isabella listened intently, her eyes thoughtful. So Richard wasn't lying about Lucy's condition. But that doesn't change the fact that he left her in a dangerous situation, Isabella said. Martha nodded. We need to find a way to support him and Lucy, but it won't be easy. Richard has to learn how to properly care for her, or we'll have to find someone else who can. Isabella sighed. We've come a long way. But I know this story isn't over. Martha gazed out the window, where the faint light of dawn reflected off rain-soaked streets. She knew the journey to justice and peace for Lucy was only beginning. The next day, Martha hurried into the hospital, not noticing the raindrops still clinging to her coat. The atmosphere in the waiting area seemed lighter compared to her previous visit, but the tension was still visible on Valeria's face. The young nurse was deeply engrossed in reviewing a stack of medical records. Martha approached her, her tone clear but full of worry. Valeria, do you have any updates about Lucy? Valeria looked up, her eyes reflecting a glimmer of hope. We just completed all the necessary tests. The results confirm that Lucy has a rare condition called xeroderma pigmentosum, XP. It's a genetic disorder that makes her skin and eyes extremely sensitive to light, especially sunlight. Martha felt her heart sink. Even though she had suspected this, hearing it from a professional made it harder to accept. What does this mean for Lucy? Can she live a normal life? Valeria flipped through a few more pages of the file and continued. XP is a rare and complex condition. Patients with this disorder must live in an environment completely shielded from light. Even minimal exposure to UV rays can cause severe damage to their skin and eyes. In Lucy's case, this explains her fear of light. Martha nodded, trying to process the difficult information. So, what do we do next? Richard said he doesn't have the money to take her to specialized centers. Is there any other way to support them? Valeria frowned, thinking for a moment before replying. We'll arrange for her to be transferred to a center that specializes in treating XP patients. There, Lucy will receive proper medical care and live in a safe environment. But more importantly, her family needs to be thoroughly educated on how to create a suitable living space for her. Martha stood silently, aware of how challenging this would be for Richard. He had done his best, but clearly, it wasn't enough. And Richard? Will he be able to care for her in the future? Valeria shrugged slightly. That depends on him. If Richard truly wants to keep Lucy with him, he'll need to completely change his lifestyle and learn how to care for her under the strict requirements of this condition. But to be honest, not everyone has the patience or ability to do that. Martha glanced through the glass window at Lucy lying on the hospital bed, the light in the room adjusted to a minimal level to avoid causing her discomfort. Isabella had just arrived and stood next to Martha, her expression full of concern. "Martha, is there any news?" Isabella asked softly, though her voice betrayed her worry. Martha relayed the full diagnosis to Isabella. When she finished, Isabella sighed, leaning against the wall, her gaze distant. "XP. I've heard about it in a documentary. Kids with this condition have to live like vampires, avoiding daylight. It's not an easy life." Valeria interjected, her tone filled with empathy. "That's true, but the important thing is that Lucy has a chance to live if she's cared for properly. We'll arrange for her to be transferred to a specialized center as soon as possible." Martha nodded and turned to Isabella. "We have to explain this to Richard. He needs to understand that this is the only chance to give Lucy a better life." Richard sat motionless in the interrogation room at the police station, his eyes red and his face haggard. When Martha and Isabella entered, he looked up, but his gaze was heavy with exhaustion. Martha pulled out a chair across from him, placing the file on the table. Her voice was serious yet gentle. "Richard, we've received Lucy's test results. She has a rare condition called xeroderma pigmentosum, which makes her extremely sensitive to light. This explains her fear of light." Richard frowned, looking as though he didn't fully understand. Martha continued. "This means that Lucy needs to live in a special environment, completely avoiding sunlight and UV rays. If not, she'll be at serious risk." Hearing this, Richard dropped his head into his hands, covering his face. I don't know what to do. I just wanted to protect her, but I did it wrong, didn't I?" Isabella sat down beside him, her voice softer. "Richard, we know you love your daughter. But what you've done isn't right. Now, Lucy needs specialized care. We've arranged for her to be transferred to a center where she'll be safe." Richard looked up, his eyes filled with anguish. "But what about me? I can't live without her. She's everything to me." Martha kept her tone firm but understanding. "You can still be with Lucy, but you need to learn how to care for her. This will require significant changes on your part. If you truly love her, you'll make it happen." Richard was silent for a long time, seemingly grappling with his inner turmoil. Finally, he nodded, his voice trembling. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep Lucy with me. Please, show me how." The next day, during a brief meeting at the hospital, Martha, Isabella, and the medical team discussed the next steps. A social worker named Marta was assigned to assist Richard. Marta spoke calmly. "We'll guide Richard step by step on how to care for Lucy. However, initially, she'll need to stay at the treatment center to stabilize her condition. After that, if Richard proves he can meet the requirements, she'll be allowed to live with him again." Isabella exchanged a glance with Martha before addressing Marta. "Richard seems genuinely willing to make amends. But he'll need a lot of support, both emotionally and financially. Do you have any plans to help him?" Marta nodded. We'll work with charities and local authorities to ensure that Richard and Lucy receive the support they need. But this will be a long journey, not just financially but also emotionally. That afternoon, Richard was brought to visit Lucy at the hospital. As he entered the room, he saw his daughter sitting on the bed, her eyes no longer filled with the overwhelming fear they once held. Richard approached her and knelt by her bedside, his voice choked with emotion. "Lucy, I'm so sorry. I failed to take care of you properly. But I promise, from now on, I'll do everything I can to keep you safe and happy." Lucy looked at him, her eyes welling up with tears. She didn't say anything, but her small hands reached out and lightly touched Richard's face. It was the first sign of forgiveness. Isabella stood quietly in the corner, watching the scene unfold. She felt a small sense of relief and turned to Martha, speaking softly. "Maybe Richard does deserve another chance." Martha nodded but maintained a cautious tone. "Yes, but we need to make sure that Lucy remains safe, whether Richard succeeds or not." They left the hospital with a clear plan and a fragile hope for Lucy's future. On the drive back, Isabella gazed out the window. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a gray but peaceful sky. "At least tonight, we did something good," she said. Martha smiled faintly. "Yes, but this is just the beginning." Richard returned from the hospital with a newfound determination. Though his face still bore traces of exhaustion, his eyes held a spark of hope. As soon as he stepped into his old, run-down house, he began planning to change everything. He spent the entire afternoon cleaning out the dark, damp room he had once thought was safe for Lucy. He opened the windows, letting in gentle light, and removed all the old, decaying furniture. Neighbors, who had long regarded Richard as nothing more than a drunk, began to notice the changes. An elderly woman named Dorothy, who lived nearby and had often seen Richard's struggles to raise his daughter, knocked on his door later that afternoon. Richard, usually reserved, opened the door hesitantly. "Richard, I heard about Lucy's condition," Dorothy said, her kind eyes meeting his. "If you need any help, please let me know. Lucy is a sweet child, and I think the whole neighborhood would be willing to support you both." Richard stood stunned by Dorothy's unexpected kindness. After a few moments of hesitation, he nodded. "Thank you, Dorothy. I really do need the help." News of Lucy's situation spread quickly through the neighborhood. The next day, as Richard worked on repairing a broken window, a group of neighbors appeared unexpectedly. They brought paint, brushes, and various repair tools. A young man named Michael approached Richard, patting him on the back. "Richard, Dorothy told us you want to make this place better for Lucy," Michael said with a friendly smile. "We're here to help. Don't worry about the costs." Richard was so moved that he couldn't find the words to respond. He simply bowed his head in gratitude, his eyes filled with tears. Throughout the day, the neighbors worked together to renovate the house. They painted the walls a soothing light blue and equipped Lucy's room with UV-blocking curtains and soft lighting to suit her needs. This was only the beginning. A local charity, introduced by Marta, reached out to Richard to offer long-term support. They pledged to cover Lucy's medical expenses and to provide training for Richard on how to care for her. A community meeting was held later that week, with many residents in attendance. People not only donated money but also offered ideas to help Richard and Lucy. A middle-aged woman named Carmen suggested, "I can help look after Lucy while Richard is at work. My daughter is a teacher, and she's also willing to help tutor Lucy at home if needed." Each offer of assistance brought tears to Richard's eyes. He realized that, for years, he had isolated himself from the world, only to find that the love and support of his community could open a new door of hope for him and Lucy. With the help of Marta and the charity, Richard enrolled in a specialized course on caring for children with XP. He learned how to use protective equipment like UV-blocking glasses and sun-resistant clothing. He was also taught how to adjust the lighting in his home to suit Lucy's condition. Initially, absorbing all this information was overwhelming, but Richard kept reminding himself of his promise to Lucy. "I'll do everything for you." During this time, Lucy slowly began to open up. In the safe environment of the treatment center and with the attentive care of the nurses, she started to smile again. Every week, Richard visited her, bringing small gifts like picture books and toys. Each time, he would excitedly tell her about the changes he was making at home. "You're going to love your new room, Lucy. I decorated it with all your favorite pictures." A month later, when the doctors at the treatment center determined that Lucy's health had stabilized, they allowed her to return home. On the day of her return, the neighborhood transformed into a small festival. The neighbors decorated Richard's house with balloons and ribbons, welcoming the father and daughter as heroes. Lucy, dressed in a light blue dress, stepped out of the car, her eyes wide with wonder at the warm reception. Isabella and Martha were among the crowd, watching quietly. Martha smiled as she saw Richard, now a more confident father. Isabella turned to her and said softly, "He's really changed. I think Lucy finally has a chance at a better life." Martha nodded, her eyes filled with pride. "Yes, this is the power of love and community. Richard has proven he deserves this chance." That night, in the now warm and safe home, Richard sat by Lucy's bedside, reading her a fairy tale he had borrowed from the community library. Lucy, her eyes bright and a rare smile lighting up her face, listened intently. As Richard closed the book, he looked at his daughter, his heart swelling with happiness. "Lucy, do you know something?" he said, his voice low and filled with love. "You're the light of my life. It wasn't the darkness that protected you, it was your love and courage that lit up my world." Lucy nodded slightly, her tiny hands resting on his. "I'm not afraid anymore, Papa. Because I know you'll always be here." Outside, the lights from the neighbors' houses shone brightly, a testament to the unity and compassion of the community. People who had once distanced themselves from Richard were now his friends and supporters. Before turning off the lights, Richard stepped to the window and looked up at the starry sky. He silently thanked life for giving him a chance to make things right, for bringing wonderful people into his life, and for giving him a small but deeply meaningful family. In the peaceful quiet of the night, the little home wasn't just filled with the love of a father and daughter but stood as a symbol of the belief that, even in the hardest times, kindness and determination can change everything. They had weathered the storm together, and now, a brighter future awaited them. The story of Richard and Lucy teaches us a profound lesson about love, patience, and the power of community. In the face of the most challenging circumstances, true compassion can inspire people to change and overcome themselves. Community support and kindness don't just save individuals who have lost their way, they also open doors to hope for a better life. Most importantly, it reminds us that love isn't just an emotion, it's a series of tangible actions to protect and care for the ones we cherish.